French-Tunisian rapper Swagg Man is being sued in Florida court for defrauding his fans after he just got a 20-year sentence in Tunisia for defrauding 20 fans there. So I'm Kevin Kneupper. I'm an attorney at Kneupper and Covey, and I want to walk y'all through a case of influencer fraud on their own fans, which is something that's become more and more common recently, and exactly how Swagg Man managed to steal a bunch of swag from people who trusted him, people who basically sort of idolized him out in France and in the Arabic world, where he's kind of a real big deal. You may not have heard of him as much if you're in the United States, Canada, sort of other Western countries, but in France, in other French-speaking countries or Arabic-speaking countries, he is a huge thing. He has 70 million listens to his music in other languages. He's never really broken through to the English world, but he is breaking through now because people are starting to pursue him all around the world as he's moved to Miami, where he is right now. Nobody knows, specifically, I guess, because he has this 20-year sentence. He was tried in absentia, which means basically in his absence in Tunisian court, and they gave him 1 year for each victim who had come forward there. Now, he says that this is all just sort of persecution and that there's a guy in Tunisia who's going after him and sort of is rallying all these people up. But it does seem like a lot of people are saying this. There are a lot of stories about this coming out of France as well, where people are alleging that he basically, to get all the money he was throwing around, and because probably most of y'all don't know who he is, I'll show you some pictures in a second, but he basically is sort of they call him the French Post Malone or the Arabic Post Malone, that he basically kind of looks like Post Malone. That's not actually him, that's a AI picture, but I'll show you his real picture. Kind of very tattooed all over his face, and just sort of tossing money everywhere with tiger striped helicopters and just the lifestyle that every rapper tries to show off with lots of bling all over the place. And what people are saying is that basically that he took advantage of kind of the parasocial relationship that people have with influencers. If you don't know what that is, it's this thing where they call it parasocial. It's not really social, but it feels social. It feels like when you're watching an influencer that you've known for a long time, that you kind of you feel like you have this relationship with them, but it's one way. You know a lot about them. You think maybe you don't even really, but because there's sort of this new celebrity where it's spread out a little more, it is much easier for people to sort of, who are bad actors, I guess, to awe or to hold in awe their fans and to get money from them in ways that traditionally con men would be doing. But now they do that with a little bit of fame, and it becomes just that much more powerful. So let's first look at what he looks like. I'm going to show you a Rolling Stone article that's outlined, a real good article actually, that outlines all of this, and then I'll walk you through what people are saying there and what this lawsuit in Miami is about, because it will show you what not to do if you are a fan of a influencer or celebrity who starts chatting with you and says, "Hey, would you like to give me some money for an investment?" Answer is probably don't do that. Here's this Rolling Stone article. I recommend you go read it there. It's got Swagg Man. It's got sort of pictures of him. I'll show you some other pictures in a second. You can see he's got a Tiger helicopter. He's doing all this stuff, and it goes through. You can see it talks about just little excerpts here where they say that he basically he started his kind of career by just setting on fire 500-pound notes, or 500 euro notes rather, which is probably 5,000 or $500. I think it's about 1-to-1 ratio. And then he just starts getting money, he claims, and his songs have streamed 73 million times, and he's never come over here. But he kind of like is just, there's some bling, and he's tats from skull to toe is what they say that he has. And he's this talks about, you got to just kind of read it to get the full flavor of it. But I just wanted y'all to see this article because it is very much, if you're interested in this, this is a nice long form explanation of it and what he's doing here. And there's a part here I want to show you at the bottom about this Tunisian case, which is that they've got this guy who he says he admits he's trying to bring Swagg Man down, basically because he's like, you're making Tunisia look bad. You have all these victims. The victims are saying that they basically met Swagg Man. There's his wife. And his wife is kind of like allegedly involved in all of this. And this is this company. You're going to see this AAA Financial is and this Florida attorney. These are the guys who are going to be in this lawsuit that I'm going to show you the details of it. And this is kind of the key part here, that earlier this year he was found guilty in Tunisia of defrauding 20 victims. He didn't attend. That means in absentia, he's not there. So he has this 20-year total sentence. He's got an international warrant out for his arrest. He's had to renounce his citizenship. And basically, and then they're looking at him in France for embezzlement. Where he's running around now, I don't know. Let me show you a little more of Swag Man because he's still on social media, which is kind of interesting. But let's look at what he's doing over there. Here's his Instagram, so you can get so we can see some pictures in a little more detail here without going to that article. So doesn't it wants me to be logged in? Whatever. Here's some stylized stuff of him. You can see he is very like heavily tattooed. Don't know how many I can get from him here. I can go pop over to his TikTok in a second. I know he likes bears. Uh, so just, but you can see that's his brand. He's got this. I think it's called. It's pronounced Pose Bro. But then probably none of nobody here. I hadn't really heard of him until I saw him as this fraud. It does look like this is about like this would be a Netflix documentary like waiting to happen. Like what they're showing, what they're saying here is like really kind of crazy. What he's done here when we start seeing. Here's his TikTok. Let's see if we can just play a couple of these so you can get a flavor of kind of who he is. They may not be in English. There's a lot of him just sort of laughing, but here's like him playing. You can see him. Looks lip sung because he just sort of stops singing in the or matching it in the middle. Let's see if we can show one here of him. Just a little more flavor of him. He likes cats or whatever. So that's again, not really in the English language world, but he does have 1.2 million followers here. He's got a million followers on Instagram, so he is sort of like that's enough to be like a pretty big deal when you're talking about France and these other countries. So, what's going on with these fans? What are people saying is happening to them whenever they say they message Swagman on TikTok or Instagram? And that's what kind of happens like with these influencers, right? They'll get just random messages from people. What people are claiming, and I'm normally a little careful, pretty careful as an attorney, but if this guy's been sentenced to 20 years, I doubt he's showing up to sue anybody. But if he does, he's probably it won't be there long. So what people are saying Swagman did to them is basically like they go message him, and then he sort of like they're like surprised that this very famous celebrity in their part of the world just starts chatting back with him, and he's like, "Oh, hey, let's meet up, let's hang out." So you've messaged this random celebrity with just like a message you think is going off to nowhere. Maybe they'll read it, and then suddenly they're talking to you and want to like hang out and stuff. And they're like making friends, and the celebrity's all like, that would be kind of very weird. And if you let's say you did that to like Jake Paul or Logan Paul or someone, you'd be like, why is this guy talking to me? Or you should. The people don't or didn't with Swagman, even though he was like this huge deal over there. And what they say ultimately happened, and it's not one person, it seems to be a bunch of people, 20 in Tunisia alone. They say that basically he would start talking to them about these great investment opportunities he had. And if you just gave him a little money, $25,000, $30,000, he would like triple it and make all this money. And just that was kind of the gist of it. It's a standard, like, if you've ever watched American Greed, that show, it's a documentary show that just shows con artists, and that's just kind of like all they do, like regular con artists. They'll be people you've never met, kind of charismatic. They go talk, worm their way into your social world, and then start convincing you to invest in something that really is just nothing, and then take the money. And that's what they allege happened to him. What's unique here is that it's being done in this new social media world by someone who is not sort of having to worm his way in anywhere. He just sits there and waits for fans who love him to go um, start messaging him, and then he just messages. And if he can get anyone to give him money, people are saying that he was giving it to them with like cash or cryptocurrency or stuff that isn't traceable. So they're kind of like, well, we don't have all this proof. The one in Florida has a little more proof because there's someone from Tunisia who is alleging that Swagman basically roped them into a real estate deal with fake real estate and then embezzled and laundered the money around so that nobody could like find out where it was. And we're talking about 1.5 million euros there, which is a lot of money. So let's look at that lawsuit and see what the American lawyers and are alleging in Miami about what Swagman did in that particular case. And this is why, even if it's this guy may be a celebrity you don't know, but this is something probably in our new world people are going to have to be real careful about because there will be con artists who become more famous, and you can't just go hand money off for investments to celebrities. And by the way, like as some of y'all probably know, that's already kind of like I mentioned, like Jake and Logan Paul. NFTs are not a whole lot different with what some people have been doing with those. So the only difference is really that the guy's not like personally chatting with you, trying to butter you up to get money. But let's look at the lawsuit. Here's the complaint. That is the first document filed in any lawsuit. It lays out the plaintiff's allegations. You can see this was filed in the Southern District of Florida, which is where Miami is. That's just a part of Miami, like a federal court out there. Um, you look here, you can see there's the plaintiffs, these two people, Patrick Muller and Muna Bouzid. If I pronounce those names wrong, sorry. I'm a Texan, and these are people from Tunisia, and my chance to pronounce things correctly is very low from the get go. But you see, they have Swagg Man here. He has several names. They've changed around a little according to that Rolling Stones article, a Rolling Stone article rather. You can see I'm already mispronouncing a magazine. So then his original name is Iteb Zybet. Um, this is his wife here, Lolita Rebulard, and she's French, I believe. And then all these companies plus two Florida residents, Yvette Tenord and Johnny Pravilis. And then they have all these companies, and what the allegation is basically it's going to be that these companies are kind of shell companies that were being used to accept money for a fake real estate investment and then move it around so that no one could find it again. It's how kind of money laundering occurs. Basically, if you don't know how money laundering works, the answer is it's really complicated to the point where it's hard even for me, like looking at transactions to try to like figure out what they're doing. And that's the point. The point of money laundering and how they do it is just sort of move money over and over so that it gets so complex that anybody looking at where it all moved can't really figure out like what are they even doing, where did it go, where did it start, where did it end. It's just creating paperwork and moving money to sort of hide it. And that's why you would have a bunch of shell companies, is because if they just keep selling property around to each other in circles or to different people and then creating the money and whatever, like you just tracking it down becomes something where some people would give up, right? It's hard. But when you know the source, it's a lot easier. Like when you know it's all going to Swagg Man and back and forth with his friends, then it's really okay. You can move it wherever you want, but we know where it starts and where it ends, and so all this stuff in the middle is just stuff. So what are they saying happened in this lawsuit? It's very similar to what these other people are saying. You can see they even cited the Rolling Stone article about the crimes and antics of Swagg Man. Again, a very good article. And here's their introduction for what they're saying. So they say that they're suing them because of their actions perpetrated on plaintiffs and countless others in furtherance of their international investment and real estate fraud, and that scheme involved the solicitation of millions of dollars from unsuspecting victims, such as plaintiffs here, for indirect investment in various real estate projects in South Florida. However, contrary to the sales pitches being made by the defendants, there were never any actual investments or real estate opportunities to be made. Rather, defendants formulated a whole scheme whereby, at the direction of defendant Zybet, which is Swagg Man, international investors were sold the opportunity to invest in their own little part of the American dream, which ironically turned out to be a nightmare. Rather than investment, there's a typo. Rather than or investment of the monies of its victims as promised, upon receipt of the wired funds, defendants would immediately divert such monies to accounts held in the name of the defendants for their personal use, to their related shell companies, or to make deposits for the purchase of other real estate not otherwise disclosed to the victims. So what does all that mean in regular people language? Because they started lawyering a little at the end. They started getting a little complex. It means the guy went to all these people in Tunisia, according to them, and they're saying that he came out there to people in other countries, started saying, hey, I'll sell you some land in Florida, which is actually the traditional place where if you're going to make a joke about stealing money from someone in a real estate fraud, it's, hey, I've got some swampland in Florida to sell you. Because that's a common place where people used to sell, buy in Florida, and nobody drove in there and don't know how bad the land can be in some places. In this case, it looks like he basically just he's alleged to have just sort of lied, like, oh, I've got this real estate investment, and he's going out to people in Tunisia, fans, people who love him because they've heard his rap music, and then he just takes the money and then doesn't invest in anything. He just we'll see later that he's alleged to have bought a Lamborghini with it for 300 grand or so, and this is about 1.5 million that's at issue in this particular lawsuit. And then a lot of very difficult to follow real estate transactions that, like, I'm not sure I even understand what he's really doing, but they are just, you can see the money just moves, and then ultimately ends up in a Lamborghini. So let's look down here a little bit. So they say that sadly, before the victims of this massive fraud, including the plaintiffs, were able to fully discover that they'd fallen prey to a massive international fraud with the assistance and/or acquiescence of defendant New Miami, which is one of the shell companies, the defendants were able to flip the unlawfully acquired assets and move the proceeds from such sales to the accounts of other bad actors, most commonly to accounts held by affiliates of the defendants and often located outside of the United States. So they're saying that he just took this money and just moved it off to who knows where. Now they say, okay, the plaintiffs are residents of Tunisia and France. So that's, again, like home base for Swagg Man. And then they say Swagg Man now is a citizen of Florida and resides in Miami-Dade County. They say Swagman has maintained a prolific social media presence on platforms such as Twitter and Instagram. We just saw that, and where he touts himself as being a successful entrepreneur, investor, and rapper, performing under the name Swagman. And he posts a bunch of like watches and clothes and sports cars and exotic vehicles and all the money. Exactly what every rapper in the universe has ever done. And then they say this other his wife is a citizen of Florida. She is originally from France, I believe. And then that they are like the sole owners and operators of two of these real estate companies. Um, it says here that it kind of notes what I was saying earlier, that even though the overwhelming majority of the social media followers are either in Europe or Africa and are of Tunisian or French descent, such as these plaintiffs. And then they've got some other shell companies in here that are defendants. They've got kind of explanation of like people are trustees of different companies. Trustee just means you're, I guess one of these is a trust. So a trust is like a legal entity. It's not really a corporation. It holds assets for people. Like that's what they say in trust. You're holding the asset sort of for the benefit of that person. Sometimes it's even for yourself, right? So you could be a trustee for your own trust to yourself. A lot of those are created, if it sounds like kind of BS. The reason it sounds like that is because a lot of times it's being used, for legal protection or for tax protection or to keep your kids. The sort of traditional thing is to, if you heard of trust fund baby, rich people often use these to keep their kids from spending their money on the exact same junk that Swagman spends on all that swag, right? They don't want their kids buying Tiger helicopters when they turn 18 with the family money that you spent 6 years acquiring. They will phase it in, be like, oh, you only get your trust when you're 25, and then it's a certain amount a year or whatever. No Tiger helicopters for you unless you save your money. And so that's what that is. Here's another trust. It's a lot of this is just like real complex stuff. And then he sues these other two people, this Tenard and Prevelis are their last names. Says that they are basically like people who helped him in Florida to move this money around with these kind of fake transactions. And there's some Nevada companies too. He's got a lot of companies. That's what happens when you start doing uh, sort of things like this to move money. If we read here, they start getting into some specific allegations here. They say, like so many before them, beginning in and around April 2020, defendants set their sights on the plaintiffs. And they say basically that one of the things that all of Swagman's victims generally share, or not all, but they generally share in common, is that they're also Tunisian. So he kind of, according to this lawsuit, was looking for people in Tunisia to as victims, which makes a little bit of sense. If you're from a country like Tunisia, there's a lot of like national pride, I think, involved here on both ends, right? So you see this person from your country go out and become this big thing in France, which is sort of historically like colonizing Tunisia and used to be the boss, and now your guy's the boss over there. And so if you're a Tunisian, I think there's a lot of like pride involved in like, wow, this guy made it from out of here. And I think that's part of what's going on with this guy who Swagman claims is orchestrating all this stuff, or at least what that guy says is like, look, part of my pride is like, I don't want this guy representing my country anymore, and I want to take him down so that we don't he's not running around exploiting my people. And so that's sort of a lot of this essentially, is that even though Swagman's now in Miami and had been in France, he was sort of going back to Tunisia to find people to sort of take money from. And if you think about it too, in Tunisia, it's not like a super rich country. Um, Taking $25,000 from someone in Tunisia is like exponentially higher than, that's a lot of money here. It's a real lot of money in Tunisia, and $1.5 million is just like off the charts for Tunisia and for here, frankly. So this says basically that despite having never met Swagman before and only knowing of him by way of his large social media presence in Europe and parts of Africa, in or around April 2020, the plaintiffs here were approached in Tunisia by his wife, by Swagman's wife, and they were presented with an opportunity of a lifetime to invest in a South Florida real estate fund led by the world-renowned and successful entrepreneur and investor Swagman. So that should be to tell too. Like if the world-renowned investor you're going with, like world-renowned investors generally don't call themselves Swagman, I mean, like no offense, but that's just not. There's a lot of good investors, but they don't sort of do that. And they say that once Swagman's wife sensed their interest, she arranges an in-person meeting between them and Swagman. So he's literally like going to come meet them and then pitch them this investment. And so I think a lot of people get this sort of celebrity, like stars in their eyes, metaphorically, and maybe I guess it's all metaphorically, but they think, oh, this celebrity, like, wow, he's talking to me. I'm just a little guy and he's a big guy, and so wow, this is crazy. and then they just get swept along. So this says, as promised by his wife, within just weeks, the plaintiffs here are like in a meeting with Swagg Man. He's got he's they say in his full Swagg Man attire, including wearing his luxury clothing, diamond necklaces, and watch, to hear about his new investment opportunity to acquire indirect ownership of luxury real estate located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And they said he gives them the opportunity to participate in his fund's first property acquisition, which is this random place in Fort Lauderdale, and for just 1.6 million euros. And they say they're skeptical, but he turns on the charm with his wife, and they're telling him the plaintiff all these tales of his childhood, where he just, oh, we coincidentally I grew up in the exact same part of Tunisia as you, and here's my childhood. And they say they didn't. He had like pictures of all his successful real estate investments, which is easy to get a picture of a big building and just be like, that's mine. And how would you know if you're just in Tunisia, never been to Florida even? Um, this says that the plaintiffs didn't know that his purported success was all smoke and mirrors, and he'd just been running scams everywhere, and that there's been criminal indictments. And he's been flagged by Interpol. If you don't know who Interpol is, they're kind of like an international crime fighting organization. They're not really the Avengers, but they're just like the international police is what it stands for. So kind of like a European FBI kind of thing. And it says that at the time of this quote chance encounter, they were never told that, so they didn't actually know that Swagg Man was married to his wife. They thought they were just sort of two, like a random woman introducing them to Swagg Man. And they say that again, he's been convicted for and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, which he has not yet served in Tunisia. Um, then they say Swagg Man basically like convinces them, hey, this is a no-brainer. I've already like set all this up. We've got a good sales price. All you got to do is give me the money. And then he basically says like he starts doing exactly what according to this he does exactly what con artists generally do, which is to start saying, oh, you get all this huge return on your investment. When people start hyping up, oh, you're guaranteed money or whatever in a few months, like that's a huge red flag. And he starts showing, they say he presented one with a bunch of documents that supposedly show the listing, a bunch of like wire deposits on this like company's letterhead, that have directions of where to wire it. There's companies they hadn't even heard of on some of this paperwork, and they say it made them a little uneasy and concerned. So they talk to, they reach out to Swagg Man and ask for kind of insurances about these instructions. Hey, is it okay to send this money to this like company we've never heard of? And Swagg Man said, they say outright lied to them, and he starts saying there's nothing. No, it's all cool. You're fine. That's just like the escrow agent, which is someone who just kind of works as a go-between to hold money. And he tells them like, yeah, just go give the money, just send the 1.5 million euros, and we're great. And then they say, so they do that, right? They're just like, okay, we send $1.5 million to this company we've never heard of. They kind of show like these are like the transactions that they did. They kind of are outlining them. So it totals 1.6 million euros. And then they say the company that they sent this to actually had like no money. Was just like, uh, and they're saying like Wells Fargo. It looks like they maybe teeing up Wells Fargo to go after him, because they say that Wells Fargo, the big bank, failed to like do any kind of inquiry or follow up on red flags or realize that this company was like just a big scam. And they say actually there, even though Swagg Man and his wife were telling them there's this big real estate fund, there actually wasn't a fund. There weren't any investment opportunities. The property wasn't even really for sale. He was just like making up stuff. So he made up a fake real estate fund and just had them send money to a shell company that he controlled with his co-conspirators. And then before they could figure that out, he starts laundering it, according to them. So now they get into the laundering, and they say, and this is all real complex, but they basically say he just starts like moving this between different properties. So they take the money and they start paying for real estate, like county taxes on one of their other properties that they own, and then they wire transfer money out to a down payment to buy another property, and then they do more wire transfers, and then even more wire transfers, and they just keep moving it, buy property, sell it to their friends, buy it to their friends. Now the money's all just sort of moved around. You can see all this, and the big one is that he some amount of money they say was sent to a lease or to a company to actually not lease but buy. It was a lease. VA Leasing is the name of the company, but he bought a 2017 Lamborghini Huracan LP 582 convertible, and they have got the VIN number and everything. And then they say that he like to launder it even more. They just sell this property to another buyer for 1.6 million, which, and then they supposedly are making money on it. And that's all super complex, because the idea is just like move the money. Then by moving the money, you hide the money, and it's so hard for them to go like find it and get it back from Swagg Man, who's now like done whatever he does with that, bought more watches or just like spent it, or who knows. One interesting thing you'll see here at the bottom that they are doing here, so they've laid out all this stuff. Um, they start using the language alter ego. They say that this shell company is the alter ego of these two defendants, Tenard and Prevelis. What is an alter ego? So there's legal concepts that if you're actually trying to collect money in a scenario like this where someone is moving it around using shell companies, um, I mean, the alter ego, you're probably thinking what we all hear it in the most common context is superheroes, right? Clark Kent is the alter ego of Superman. Bruce Wayne and Batman are alter egos. That is actually a name used for this legal theory too, which is basically if you're just sticking on a mask and that's your shell company and you don't really treat it like a real company, if you don't do what they call is follow the corporate formalities, if you there's a whole list of things that can make this happen where um, courts will basically just like zap the company out of existence. It's called piercing the corporate veil. While you're just sort of flowery lawyer language, but it basically means zapping the corporation out of existence. If you are using the company as kind of a pretend scam, it ain't gonna work because the judges like what they're saying here is that it's undercapitalized. That just means not enough money in there to actually run a business. So if you just use the company to move money around and steal from people, the court is going to treat that company like ordinarily. The reason people have companies is because it shields them from liability. The company's the one liable, not you. But the court will just say, okay, you are all now the same person. You are all legally the same person. A judgment against one is a judgment against all. And so if I win against the shell company, now I can sue the person who was sort of the one behind the shell company. That is stuff where I think people who run scams don't realize how easy it is for that to happen. Their lawyers may tell them it's hard. If it's a legit business, it's harder. If you are running something that is just sort of a money moving operation, it is very easy. Or if you're using the company in a way that is not a real business, or is obviously just sort of ancillary to a scam or something or whatever, it is going to, that company probably is not going to hold up in terms of protecting you. Um, so that's what they're trying to do here, is sort of get rid of that. And they start talking about these other people, and then they have all these counts. Now, this is a little bit weird here what they're doing. I think they've made some mistakes here. The lawyers, they have not. It's not going to matter. I don't think. I'll say that just at the start. They have wire fraud. This is a criminal statute. You can't really sue under wire fraud. We'll see what they're actually doing with it in a minute. And then this is mail fraud. Again, you cannot. There's no. The, you can't just have this as a separate like what they call a counter cause of action because you cannot sue someone under that directly. What you can sue is this under RICO, civil RICO. What is RICO? The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Now, this is a law that was passed in the 1970s to deal with. A lot of this was done by the mob, but basically companies were being used and taken over, or organizations, even like unions and things like that. Criminals were taking over them and using them to as sort of like a shield to hide behind. And RICO was passed to shut that down, to say that if a bunch of people are working together using shell companies or whatever, however they're organized, you can sue all of them as a group, or you can prosecute all of them as a group for their sort of this. They call it an enterprise that they've created. The enterprise may not be a legal entity because they may have like 20 companies, but you treat them all as like one thing, and then you can sue everybody, and they're all just sort of liable together for everything that happened. RICO is a hard statute to go forward on. It is, I will say, having done so for a lawyer, I've done a surprising amount of these cases because just as a little background on myself, like my partner and I, when we started our law firm about 4 to 5 years ago now, I think we are in the middle of the four and a half or something. We started out and are still doing RICO cases where we went after who we allege are internet scammers who are running what we call the free trial scam, basically doing fake Shark Tank ads and selling people products for $2 and then running bills across their accounts for $200 a month after you got their credit card. And so we just got certified, which means appointed as attorneys to represent a class action for these against various different companies. And I have several more going that I'm working on right now. Every one of them is a RICO case, and so we learned a lot about RICO. It is very, very hard to get to the stage that we're at in these lawsuits. The attorneys here are going to have to do some more work if they want to. I think. Well, I'll parse that a little. I'll say what actually is most likely to happen is these people are not going to show up. Certainly, Swagg Man may not. The two Florida residents may show up with attorneys, but if the attorneys show up and challenge this RICO pleading, they're going to win. Because RICO has a lot of stuff that you have to put into your lawsuit to go forward. It is a very powerful law because of what they say here, which is you can recover treble damages, which means triple damages. So if you are um, uh, like if you're getting hit on a RICO claim, there you could get three times the amount of money that you basically that are the actual damages. Like if it was 1.5 million that got stolen, then the damages would be three times that, so they would be 4.5 million. Now, what is the like? What's the problem here that I'm saying why I don't think they would win it? Well, let me first of all just show you how long this is, and here's the start of it, and then there's the end of it. That's their biggest problem. Is like there's basically nothing. There are not enough details to survive here. You can't plead RICO in a page. Even if you count these, it's still like 3 pages that will not almost just certainly ever get you a RICO claim past the requirements to plead it. And part of their problem is they're pleading. Just as an example, it has to be over a long period of time. Generally, that's more than a year. But you have to plead specific examples of what are called these predicate acts. A predicate act means an act of crime that is like violates certain federal laws that occur is they call it a predicate, which means it's sort of a necessary precursor, or I'm just using more complex words. It's a thing you got to show to win the RICO thing. So without it, you don't have a RICO, and you've got to show a pattern of these what they call predicate acts, and they have to occur over that year. But here we're only showing over a month. You have to plead like who it was with, the date, like what happened. It's they call it the who, what, where, when, why. As much of that as you can. Like if you can't, then that's one thing. But they say, oh yeah, it's been over the course of a pattern, but they don't actually show the exact details of these specific things that they're saying occurred. So that's going to be a big problem for this. I do think it gets dismissed if anyone challenges it, but they will get a chance to replete it. And it may make sense to do what they've done, honestly, because if the defendants don't show up, then like who cares? They'll just win by default. And so it may make sense not to put in the 10 or 15 pages of attorney work that they would have to do to really get it going forward at this stage, because they might just win by default. They do so many so many reasons for the lawsuit, or causes of action they call them, which are I'm just going to scroll through them. Unjust enrichment means you got money that's mine, that you don't like. As a matter of fairness, it should be given back. Fraudulent misrepresentation is just fraud, but with a negligent misrepresentation, the difference is like I didn't intend to lie to you, but I just sort of, because I was careless, I misrepresented the truth. Breach of fiduciary duty means like, oh, Swagg Man had a duty as sort of like like he was in a position of trust by being this businessman, saying he was going to take their money, that he was going to invest it for them, so he owed them certain legal duties to protect them. Constructive trust is a way to it basically says I'm asking the court to create one of these trusts we were talking about earlier, but it's not real. It's just like a fake thing the court makes to give me my money back. And there's a bunch more of these conspiracy, violations of security laws. There's just this is what's called a shotgun. Like you hit them with everything you can think of, and one of them is going to stick. And I think that's probably true that one of these things is going to stick. And then there's a bunch of documents at the back of this that are just like wire transfer stuff and whatever. So that is the lawsuit in Miami against Swagg Man. So probably most of the people watching this did not get swindled by this particular guy, but this is something like to watch out for. If you've watched Anna Delvey, that documentary that came out a couple years ago about her running around New York convincing people she was someone she wasn't. The one I just watched on Netflix that's actually reminded me a lot of this situation is about John DeLorean. Very good documentary. He's the guy who made the car in Back to the Future, and he apparently was a huge scammer and like was trying to deal drugs to make money to like keep his car company going. Did a lot of scams throughout his life. But he seems similar to me in terms of like him and Swagg Man, is that John DeLorean got real famous, and so when he had that fame, it was making it very easy for him to get money out of people, to get investments from people, and I think that that's something that uh, you should be watching out for, because fame has kind of in our modern times is more spread around than it used to be. It used to be you'd have Julia Roberts, or I'm naming her name, but there'd be 15 or 20 people everybody knew, and then nothing. And then right now it's everybody, I don't. There's 1,000 or 10,000 or however many influencers. Nobody knows them all. You all know a few. But there may be like a certain group of them who you're like, oh wow, those are those people that I know. But that does not. When there's thousands and thousands of people that have some level of fame, which causes a bunch of people to think, oh, I can sort of. They feel like they trust that person. That's when you start getting NFTs that are just trying to scam your audience that are not real investments. That's when you get stuff like this, which is even worse than that, I think, because he's sort of just like taking money according to these allegations. So you can't trust influencers just because they're on YouTube and you like them or they're fun or whatever. That does not mean that they're good people. That does not mean that they will not take your money. And if someone, no matter how famous they are, I mean, the fact that a famous person is talking to you, trying to like get an investment from you, should be something that's just like, okay, why is that happening? If Swagg Man has all the swag, why does he need some random person in Tunisia to give him money? Why doesn't he just like, and there's just a lot of red flags about that. That should make people wonder, and I think we have to be careful here too. It's not just a Tunisia thing; it is a new facet of our modern world that all y'all need to be on the lookout for. And don't hand your money to sort of randos on the internet if you've got that amount of money. So, if you want to see more videos, hit subscribe, hit one of the uncard things that are floating around, and you can watch even more crazy lawsuits like this one.